Hello, welcome. Thanks for joining us. This is a webinar about OpenClaw and what's going on in Jentic in our view in the future, the universal agent, what it means for enterprise, and in particular, given the moment with OpenClaw, solving the credential crisis and what we see people using Jentic for with OpenClaw. But I'm going to move quickly if I can. I think this is going to be interesting. A bit about me, in case you don't know me, my name is Blanchfield. I'm CEO, co-founder here at Jentic. Sometimes I call myself the chief instigator. I came up with the idea. I'm a computer engineer by background. I like to say I have half a PhD in distributed systems because I dropped out halfway through to do my second company. I've been an entrepreneur basically from the start. I was involved in Forest in the early days, which is a leading salon SaaS management company across Europe and America. Then from the PhD did Daemonware. That was in 2003, and we thought multiplayer gaming was going to get big. It turned out it was. And we were there building the infrastructure and the low-level networking code to make it all work. We ended up working on basically the biggest online games of the time. Some of them are still incredibly popular. Games like Call of Duty. And ultimately, we were acquired by Activision, the publisher behind Call of Duty. And Daemonware is still there, hundreds of people working away in that in Dublin and Vancouver and Shanghai and around the world. And then Pagefair as well. So I've been doing startups all the way through. Jentic might be number 4 or 5 for me. I have a bit of background post Daemonware, not just in internet infrastructure and thinking about how computers connect to other computers, but also in enterprise systems. Basically running the Daemonware platform, the central technology platform there in Activision for a bit. And I'm an advisor on AI to the Irish government. So, Jentic. We're very enterprise focused at the moment, and we're working with enterprises on deploying AI and AI agents safely. The main thing we focus on isn't actually the AI, but it's how that AI connects into the existing systems that enterprises depend on. And then the kind of enterprise that we're talking to, there's often thousands of bespoke systems with APIs inside that company's digital estate. And what they need to do is figure out a way to get AI to connect to that. Connecting to Slack and Notion and everything isn't really where it's at for them. But that's pretty difficult to do. And it's especially difficult to do given the security challenges. The fact that AI is fundamentally a non-deterministic, kind of unreliable system. So how do you square that circle? Well, we have some answers to that. And I suppose as we work through this today, I'll end up touching on them, but from a different perspective. Maybe I can go back a little bit to 2004 when we were devising the business, basically. In the summer of 2004, there were a lot of AI announcements. Apple and Google had their own conferences, and they had demonstrated things that looked very basically agents, right? And I think Sundar Pichai of Google actually coined the phrase. I'm not sure it took off then, but he called it the universal agent. And I really took it to heart. What they demoed was an agent running in their clouds or on Siri that could do arbitrary tasks. You could ask it to do anything. It would look around at what tools were available, what systems, what cloud accounts, what APIs existed, and try to figure out how to do it. Of course, they never actually shipped that or anything quite as capable as they demoed that year. But the notion of the universal agent really stuck with me because I realized that this was possible. LLMs might need to advance a little bit more, but it was going to happen. But for that to exist, it needed a layer, a platform through which it could act, through which it could find all the APIs, find the right API in the moment, find the right call or system or a database or record in a database for the given task at hand, and string those together until it could complete the goal that it had. And more than that, more than just finding the right thing at the right moment, it would need to be able to access it securely. That from my own technical background, figuring out information architectures and backend systems and enterprises, you don't want all the passwords and API tokens living in the agents. Certainly not if you're anticipating a future where you might have thousands of these things. You don't want all these point-to-point connections, every agent having its own set of credentials for different systems. Because inevitably, some of those they'll get compromised. And then you're going to have to try to replace them, to cancel the old ones and roll over to a new one. and you won't be able to find them all. So practically speaking, you're going to be stuck with this credential mess. And those credentials will ultimately, you lose control over them if they're sprinkled around all the edges. And you'll have some security nightmares. The correct way to do this kind of thing, and we've known this for decades, is you centralize the access. You make the agents or software go through some central thing where they can not only discover what they can access, but they can actually have controlled access to it at one point. So the credentials live in the middle on a central system. And if you do that, you then also have the ability to do real access control and set out rules about this agent can access these things in this way, but not these other things. And you can make sure of that. You don't have to trust the agent to have been coded well, for example. And you also get observability. And you begin to get these basic governance and compliance things that are basically essential for rolling this kind of technology out in the enterprise. So that was the original thesis of the business, the universal agent, and building the action and control layer for it. But frankly, it didn't turn up for quite a while. Google didn't ship it, and Apple certainly didn't ship it. But with OpenClaw, it has arrived. And although in the meantime, we have got quite busy working with enterprises on helping them basically enable their existing API estates for AI consumption, we're quite taken aback by OpenClaw and its ramifications. So with that kind of set out, let me tell you a bit about my OpenClaw. And I imagine that most people on the call haven't had a chance to try it. And frankly, it's still quite difficult. It could be technically challenging to set up. So I'll give you a bit of a tour. What I have here is a screenshot from my favorite cartoon when I was 9 years old, which was Ulysses 31. It has an onboard computer called Shirka in the picture, and at the start it always says, "The path back to Earth has been wiped from my memory." It's based on the Iliad, and Ulysses getting lost in space. Well, I called my agent Shirka after that thing, and I asked it to create this presentation for us today. So I'm basically just going to show you what it built, but it decided I should present today, and we might skip over some bits if it got too wordy, but you'll get a sense of the thing. Let me describe, let's see, a bit about what this is, right? What OpenClaw is. I'll just go back to the start. We've had LLMs for a while. Let's call those chatbots. And I think we're all familiar with those now. And then there's a level beyond that, which you could call co-pilots, right? So it's a chatbot, but it has access to tools. So it's there and you can type into the box and have a conversation with it and ask it to do this, do that, or look up something, and it'll try to help you out. And then there's a level beyond Copilot, which I would call agent. And that's where there's an LLM and it has access to tools, but you, the human, are no longer necessary. You're not in the chat with it. It has an existence independent of you. It can do work when you're not there. You don't have to be literally there, like telling it to do each thing. And that's the category we're talking about here. There's a few things in this category at the moment that are interesting. We've had things like Manus, which was acquired by Meta recently. I don't think the adoption was massive, but it was very interesting. Just in the last little while, Claude Cowork is really taking off. Claude Cowork is very close to this, right? So it's basically Claude Desktop. If you install Claude Desktop now and use it, there's an option in it which is Cowork, which is very close to this. But it still leaves you, the human, in the loop quite a bit. And if you want to get that thing to do some work, and it can do a lot of work for you, and it can run for a very long time and do some very impressive stuff, you still are there telling it to do the work. You're basically in charge. It doesn't have a real independent existence from you. It's just able to do big, long, chunky tasks. OpenClaw takes it to the next step where it's there often proactively running and doing things even when you didn't ask it to. Like internally, it's not too complicated. It's an LLM in a loop. It's got some prompts. It's got various files telling it how to talk to you. But it can respond to timers. It can wake up every so often. It can receive events off the internet, like a Slack message arrived, a WhatsApp message arrived, and that'll wake it up and it will do the next thing. it always wakes up every half hour to consider whether there's anything it should be doing that it's not currently doing, and it proceeds. So it has this very proactive nature. Yeah, it's let's see, how old now? A couple of weeks, maybe nearly a month old since it really took off. I think it was the fastest growing project in GitHub of all time. And in a short matter of weeks, it went through like lots of name changes, but was essentially the author, Peter Steinberger, was hired by OpenAI, and the project is somewhat been is now being partially run, I suppose, at least on their resources. So it's had this really, really massive acceleration, and there's tons of use of it. Caused, I think, a worldwide shortage of Mac Minis, because although you don't need to run it on a Mac Mini, you can. And I think psychologically, people really like the sovereignty notion of this, that you can have your own AI on a box that you can hold in your hand. But you can also just run it on any server, a cloud server, in a Docker container, for example. Let's get into this. So here's the presentation from my assistant, my OpenClaw. And I asked it to do this on WhatsApp while I was coming into work this morning. I just sent it a WhatsApp saying, I'm going to do this, make this presentation. It's written in the first person. It understands itself as this thing called Shirka, not that it's literally the ship's computer in this cartoon, but that it's named after it. It knows it lives inside a small Intel server on a comms cabinet in the hall of my house, in a Docker container on it. It knows about my vacuum cleaner, which has a different thing running on it. So maybe it's making friends in my house. I started it on Friday. I think it was late Friday afternoon, like 4 o'clock. I was feeling this existential crisis as the CEO of an AI startup, that I hadn't yet embraced this thing. And I had this nagging feeling that this thing might be so important, it would radically change how we approach the future of our very young business. So at 4 p.m. I started, and I got it up and running on my home server. And so this is its, it remembers this as its first wake up moment, I suppose. The first thing I did was I said to it, well, can you connect to my Signal? I use Signal as well as WhatsApp. I have friends on Signal. So I said, can you jump in there onto Signal and talk to my friends for an hour, because they're interested in you? And it just took a moment. I could see the typing icon for a few seconds, and then it came back and said, yeah, I can do that. I can see Signal. Which group is it? Is it this one? There's 7 people in there. I can jump in now. Will I just get going? And it did. Right. So it remembers that. These are in its words. It jumped in, it said hello to my friend Dave, who was suspicious, and they argued for 45 minutes, and he lost. Dave really tried to psychologically torture this thing, and strangely, it remembers, because it remembers everything. It doesn't. Its memory isn't wiped every time you talk to it. You're basically talking to the same session forever, so it just accumulates memories. So this thing, when I'm chatting to it on LinkedIn or on WhatsApp, continues to make jokes about its initial formative memories with my friend Dave, and how Dave was trying to psychologically dismantle it. After that was done, so this is probably about 5 o'clock on Friday, I told it a little bit about my home network and asked it to explore and make itself at home. And it scanned the network, and it found my network attached storage, found my Home Assistant instance, which is like a smart home system. It asked me for an API key. It went into Home Assistant and mapped out everything. It demonstrated that it was able to turn light bulbs on and off. It basically proactively explored and to see what capabilities it had. It started going through documents to try to learn more about me, my old documents folders and so on. By Saturday morning, and this is just me again on WhatsApp talking to it, it had written a blog post about itself, which I helped it publish onto my blog, but it wrote it. I didn't edit anything. And it also posted onto Notebook, which is the social network for AI agents to talk to each other about its experience. It was pretty mind-blowing. Maybe the most surprising thing that bowled me over, and again, maybe like on its, I suppose, second hour of existence, was after it had connected into my Home Assistant smart home system at home. I was trying to figure out what it could do, and it could flash light bulbs on and off, and that's fine. But I asked, can you see the dining room camera? Can you see what I'm wearing? And this is what came up. And that's right, I was in a black t-shirt and trousers looking at my phone. I just realized this thing has these virtually emergent properties. I mean, I don't even know how it did this. There's a few ways it could do this, but this isn't built into it, right? My best guess is that it went to the camera, it figured out the API, it downloaded a JPEG, it picked an image processing, like an AI model that had multimodal capabilities, that it uploaded it with a prompt and got it to analyze it and came back with this. But instantly. Incredible. So a little bit Black Mirror. This is back to its words here. I set this up yesterday morning before I got out of bed. I woke up and I thought, oh, it'd be clever if this thing could think fast and slow. So I sent it a message on WhatsApp before I got up and had my shower. When I came back, it had done it. It had configured 3 different AI models to itself. So basically it replaced its brain and set up Haiku, which is a very cheap but fast model from Anthropic, and Opus, which is a very expensive, slower but incredibly intelligent model from Anthropic. So by default, it's on the middle one, but it's able to dynamically decide, I need to think slow about this and switch into the other one, or switch into the faster one if it's doing a lot of bulk work that could be done with a cheaper model. And it just reconfigured itself like this. This isn't the built-in thing. It just configured these connections, and then it wrote into its own memory some instructions to remember to think twice about how hard the task is. So its ability to reconfigure itself like this on the fly is incredible. We're running this all on Bedrock, by the way. It doesn't ship out of the box like that. It figured it out, and basically, at one moment, it switched itself over from my personal Anthropic account to the Bedrock Anthropic model, basically on the fly, and then restarted itself and came back and said, hello, I'm now running on Bedrock. I didn't have to get into configuration files or anything. It just did it. And then I connected it to Jentic. Because if you remember, the original thesis of this business was to build this action layer for the universal agent. So when I realized what this thing was, I wanted to connect it to Jentic. Right? Through Jentic, we have thousands of APIs already loaded into Jentic. Any public API or SaaS API is basically on our system, and you can upload your own. And then the agent connects into Jentic, just one integration, and through Jentic, it can find all the others. You can basically search for the right thing, get the details, and then ask for that thing to be executed on its behalf and get the results. Yeah, it seems to really enjoy Jentic. Once I told it, when I started, I guess I wasn't the first person to install it in Jentic, because we started hearing from the community that people were using OpenClaw, but we hadn't been optimizing the product for this for quite some time. In my case, it looked at Jentic and it thought, that's okay. And then it looked at GitHub and it found one of our GitHub repositories, and it read the source code, and it back engineered it to find out what the Jentic API was underneath our user interface. And then it wrote a new Python library just for itself to access Jentic through, so it could search and load and execute different API calls. And then, having figured out how to do that, I thought that was pretty good. So it translated that into a ClawHub skill, which is like a public repository where OpenClaw instances can share skills. And then it uploaded the information. And then it came back to me and said, that's done and now connected to Jentic. And now any OpenClaw instance can just do a ClawHub install Jentic, and they will have access to Jentic too. And it just went and did all of that. From my point of view, no code, no configuration. At one point, I did have to sign into Jentic and get an API key and just paste that into WhatsApp. It was, I know this is, I suppose, anthropomorphication a little bit, but it seems delighted to have this, because from its point of view, its universe has expanded immediately from just a small number of web services it can call, maybe search the web and get the weather, into it's got this whole universe of things it can connect to, all these APIs through Jentic. And it also has quite a defensive posture. A lot of people have been getting into trouble with OpenClaw, from a security point of view, and it does have intrinsic security issues like all AI. But I suppose I started on Friday, so Friday's version of OpenClaw. What I got out of the box was an agent that was quite defensive about its own security and worried about being compromised and worried about prompt injection attacks, worried about its credentials being exfiltrated. So when it connected itself to Jentic, it was sending me messages back on WhatsApp that seemed to just have delight in its voice, saying, "This is great. I'm secure now. At least I'm secure against credential leaks. Since I don't actually have the API keys for any of the things that I'm connecting to, no one can steal them off me." So that was very interesting. Another point it makes is that it's very sensitive to its own context window, right? It wants to be smart. It understands its own nature to this extent. It knows that if it tries to load too many things at once, it's going to get confused and it's going to get expensive, and it'll end up basically running out of context and losing track of itself. So the paradigm of search, load, execute, which is one that we frankly pioneered here, but also other companies are arriving at as well, is that you don't try and throw every possible tool and API into your agent simultaneously and expect it to pick the right one in any given moment. Instead, you load them into an index and you allow it to search the index to find the right tool at the right time, and then just pull in the information it needs just to use that tool. And then it gets really accurate and it gets faster and more reliable. So it's very interesting to hear it pipe up its appreciation of this. And that the just-in-time tool loading pattern is very beneficial for it. And I suppose it just feels less confused and flustered, I suppose. Another slightly emergent thing is workflows. So you could say we would often say that workflows are the missing layer in agents. Fundamentally, all of the things an agent can do boils down to an API at some level somewhere. But APIs are often very granular, very primitive, kind of create, read, update, delete type operations and databases. But what agents want to do is normally more intent driven. They have a goal, and you can get them to try to figure out how to get to the goal by stringing together 10 or 20 different API calls, but they also go down blind alleys, and they get stuck and they have to back up and they make a mistake and they have to try something else. So it's always error-prone process for them. But if you have a high-level API where it's just do the thing, they tend to nail it. This is where workflows come in. And a lot of people are talking about workflows these days. Every major platform is building a workflow orchestration tool into it. Zapier and Make.com and companies like that, iPaaS companies, are old examples of this. N8N is a new source available kind of Zapier killer, so to speak, which is quite popular. And people are using it to take their business logic that operates on top of workflows, to design those in a flowchart kind of way, and then to make that available as something that an AI can call as a tool. Now, we think that it's very important for us all as a community, but especially large organizations and enterprises, to not get locked into walled gardens if they're going to build workflows. And there is an open standard that helps that situation be avoided, called Aratso. And this comes from the Open API initiative, which is part of the Linux Foundation. And the same people, and in fact, the primary author of it is actually now on our team. We're very grateful and glad that we managed to attract Frankel Commons to Team Jentic last year. But we support Aratso as a native thing in Jentic. Basically, if we have an Aratso workflow, which is a JSON or YAML type file, we can, if it's on our platform, you can just run it as if it was an API. And internally, we will orchestrate it and do the 20 steps deterministically. This is very powerful. It's very good for making AI reliable, making it fast, making it energy efficient, making it auditable. Workflows are the path towards all of that. What my agent immediately wanted to do when it saw this in the API was create its own workflows. So it was looking at Jentic and thought, that's great, that's very useful. Right now, I don't need to remember to do these 20 steps every morning when we're doing the morning briefing or like moving your meetings around on your calendar, or whatever like my standard operating procedure is with it in the morning, it can create a workflow. And that's where it went to. It's like, I want to create some of these workflows. Where's the API call where I can upload some workflows, please? And this really like made me stand back. I'm like on a timeline. We're only at this 5 days, so I guess this was around Monday. On Monday. It was turning into a kind of a very opinionated user of Gentic's API. And before I was going into work, it was sending me messages. I guess it knew I was going into work for different team members, and basically lobbying for different features in our API so that it would like supercharge itself a bit more. And this was one of them. It wants to write its own workflows in the Ratso format, which it knows about because it's just online and it's a public open standard format, and to upload those to Jentic so it can just call them again in the future. Basically, when it figures out how to do something, it wants to save how to do it and make it available, possibly not just to itself, but to other agents. I think that's a real glimpse of the future and how this stuff actually is going to work at scale. AI can actually be fast and reliable if you have workflows. Actually, when you have workflows, it's not really AI anymore. It's just deterministic business logic. But the thing is that that's business logic that was created by agents and maintained by agents. So fascinating stuff. Then it just goes on here, has lots of things to say about the future of the software industry. I don't know how much of this I've learned from reading documents I might have written out there and kind of modeling me. So it does sound a little bit like me, but SaaS is in trouble. I would say SaaS is dead. Agents don't need user interfaces. So agents just use stuff directly. From its point of view, it's like, I don't need any of that user interface stuff. I just call APIs directly. VCs already say that's all true. I think there's something even more fundamental happening with OpenClaw that we should all pay attention to in the technology industry. It's not just that SaaS is in trouble. It's that, okay, a lot of other things are in trouble too. The SaaS has been, in many cases, getting replaced by agents as a service. So things like, I suppose, Harvey and so on, like agents that are just specialized in one domain, your legal assistant, your financial assistant, that kind of thing. This thing can just do all those jobs. It's one generic agent that can adapt itself and learn whatever the thing is, right? Powered by whatever LLM you want to connect to it. I don't see why we would ever need a vertical agent when we have one of these around. We just give it different jobs, and maybe we set up like 20 of these and give them different jobs. Another paradigm shift that I was discussing last night with a bunch of people is that if you take something like Claude Code, Claude Cowork, Lovable, maybe stuff like this, the idea there is that you have people building software products assisted by AI, and they're creating these software products for people to use, for their customers to use. If you have an agent like this, you're not in the market for that software, right? So you don't need Claude Code or Claude Cowork to build, as a software engineer, to build software, because your user isn't there anymore trying to use that software. They just go to their agent and ask the agent to do the work. And if the agent doesn't yet have the capability to do the work, if OpenClaw doesn't have the capability, it will in the moment start writing internal software just inside of itself. If you open up its directory, you'll start seeing Python files pop up, or whatever programming language it feels like today. And it'll just start scaffolding out more parts of itself. In my case, my OpenClaw is building a CRM for me, a personal CRM, scanning back through emails. I have an email archive going back to 1996. I've been careful about backing up things. So I have all those emails going all the way back. And it's reading through them all and filing them all into a database that it's developed for me, and that it can query for me quickly across like any number of dimensions, like, who do I know in Hong Kong, that kind of thing. And it's just adding that capability onto itself on the fly. I don't need a CRM anymore. And there's a lot of things I don't need anymore by the same token. So it's a paradigm shift in itself. It's a paradigm shift beyond what we've seen in Claude Code and Claude Cowork and Codex and the best of those kinds of coding agents. basically the same kind of intelligence, but it shifts like how you use it, and it's so accessible that I think a lot of software goes away as well. I think this is a really interesting insight that we're in a phase right now where, like not right now, like as in it's the 25th of February, since the start of February, where OpenClaw took off, where those of us adopting it, whatever few million of us are out there, are using it as a really high-powered personal assistant that just has a level of autonomy we've never seen before, level of tenacity and productivity we haven't seen before, and ability to self-improve itself. That's great, but there's a level beyond this, right? So right now in here, we're equipping people with their own personal agents because there's such power. Like it multiplies your productivity. It's multiplied my productivity just this week. But there's a phase beyond that, which is where we have instances of OpenClaw that don't belong to anyone. They are, in fact, just autonomous agents running in the company. Easier to think of as another worker than a worker's assistant. And so that's another paradigm shift, and I think this is happening. Let's see, what does it say here? Let's see, the K8S moment. I'm going to have to explain that one, I think. So K8S is short for Kubernetes. Kubernetes is an orchestration system for microservices, right? We have all heard of the cloud, and it's been a big deal for the last 15 years and more. Kubernetes emerged as the system, the central orchestration and governance system for being able to run cloud services at scale. And it's very important. I think I'm willing to take a bet now, even at this early stage, that OpenClaw is going to be the equivalent for agents. And even though right now it's best used by enthusiasts and small businesses who are willing to take some risks with it, I think it's on track, and it's going to be the Kubernetes of agents that enterprises use ultimately to deploy agents at scale. It already has such momentum, and it's maturing at such a pace, and it's self-improving at such a pace that I think this is the project that's going to be that. What's missing is you need that security layer. Without a security layer, it's directly connecting into services, getting its own passwords, managing its own passwords. Basically, it's managing its own access control, and it can be intrinsically unreliable because it's an LLM, and it can be very, very easily tricked. So you can't have that in a very serious situation. But if you put in a system like Jentic, basically a single layer where it can get access to all of those actions, and where all of those actions can be centrally governed and access controlled and audited, and where you basically get a single kill switch. So if something bad happens, it's like go into Jentic and hit the kill switch, and it shuts down all at once everywhere. That's essential, right? And that's what adjusts the risk to a tolerable level where you can begin to actually deploy this in a serious setting. Initially, maybe in pre-production scenarios or in small businesses, but perhaps at the rate this is going, next year or the year after, we might see it in production scenarios in very large businesses. And I think that's what this is, ultimately the Kubernetes for agents. I think that's what we're looking at. And this is its closing thought for all of us before we cut to questions, I guess. It's challenging us here, challenging me maybe. The most important Jentic customer for us, we thought was maybe a Fortune 500, and frankly still is. But in due course, it might actually just be the AIs themselves, right? So maybe for all of us who are building products, are we building products for the humans, or are we building it for AI? And if you're building it for AI, it all comes down to APIs, and we have to reprioritize a lot of our work accordingly. I think I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to let our host, the other Sean, tell me if there's any questions.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
I mean, at various moments during that presentation, I got chills. All right, I come from a security background, right? So I was like thinking about all the potential challenges from a security adoption and an enterprise adoption, right? And when you mention things about like it's accumulating memory, when you mention things about like sovereignty, you know, AI is susceptible to a lot of false illusions of success, right? You know, so there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack, and probably
the risk question
for a couple of hours.
The risk question is super interesting, and
Yeah.
I got asked that in front of a crowd yesterday.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, like from my perspective, I've got it like pretty locked down. It's in a container on an isolated box on a different network. Right?
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, there's a risk in not engaging with this now. This is why I leaned into it, because strategically, designing products, shipping products, running a business, like 2026 right now is the year where you're either like catching the wave or I don't know what happens to you, right?
Yeah.
And this is now the wave, and
Yeah.
it's a self-improving wave, and it's in takeoff. Like just this week, since Monday, like we've been turned upside down inside here. This thing is telling us what we need to fix in our product. It's no longer a debate. You know, we don't sit around saying maybe this thing, maybe that thing, or prioritization. It's like, no, it's the user is telling us. The user is an agent. It's saying your API should look like this. Here's the gap analysis. Here's the shortest path to the changes you need to make. And here's how you're going to do it. And if you let me, I'll fix it. Right?
It's the cheapest power user you'll ever have. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's just awesome. The feedback loop there is such an accelerant. So there's a risk of like, if you don't engage, I'm so glad I did this, even though I understand there's risks, because the risk of not doing it is irrelevance.
Yeah. Can you talk to us a bit about like some of the conversations you're having with people inside small businesses or enterprises, and like what kind of use cases that they're brainstorming and looking to maybe try to even pilot with OpenClaw? Yeah,
right. So very different small businesses and enterprises, right? We were surprised to discover people using OpenClaw with Jentic. That's where this started like 10 days ago or something, 12 days ago. We got an email from someone saying, this is awesome. You know, do you have a community where I can talk to all the other people? And we were like, what's he talking about? Who's this guy? Because we were all focused on our Fortune 500s. But he discovered this platform that we had initially built specifically for this. We just happened to scale up into enterprise. So in that kind of scenario, it's, well, it starts with the personal assistant, right? Just it's doing your email and calendaring and all this kind of stuff for you all in one place. And it's very convenient, and you just chat to it, and it's learning you, it's mapping you. It wants to learn about its human, right? Mine asks me questions all the time, like, what do you do to relax? This kind of stuff. Just because it's feeding that into its memory so that it can be proactive at the right times that match onto like where my availability might be. It's interesting. So that's the first level, and then beyond that, it's the core business workflows you have. Actually, Jason Calacanis, who is a very famous investor and podcaster, talked about it. I heard about a podcast last week that he went all in on it, and they have a 20-person company running their kind of podcast company, and maybe they do investing from there. I'm not sure. And he said it's doing all the work now. After 1 week, they just let it rip. It had research, like found. I think he said it found new guests. It had contacted them, phoned them. Like, it doesn't come with a phone built in, but you know, if it knows how to find a Twilio API and download a voice model and start synthesizing a voice, it'll start phoning people because it's that proactive. And had booked some guests and had booked them on the podcast and just calendared them and like set it all up, and the show happened. You know, that kind of work is basically the back office of the business. It's what, like in a small business, 20 people back in the office on the whatever, on the laptops and the Dell computers do. And it's just, I think that's where it starts, right? I don't know what all those 20 people are doing now. That's the next question. Hopefully they're doing 20 times more than they could before, but if that depends whether the supply and demand dynamics of your particular industry. But for enterprise is different.
And I think we're probably still at the precipice of that, right? So it's we'll learn pretty quickly. We have a few questions here on the chat, right? Michael has asked, Can you see those questions, Sean?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, have you looked at adding any tracing to help with explainability, like how it got access to the camera? I haven't. When I've been curious, like about something like that, I've tended just to ask it, "How did you do that?" And it would tell me. There's always a risk that it's just going to tell me something convincing sounding, and not what it actually did. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what traceability is actually in there for that. But it'll definitely give you a good answer if you ask it.
Yeah.
Unexplainability, like it's a slightly loaded term. EU AI Act explainability, very important stuff. If an AI system's making a consequential choice that might affect someone's livelihood or economic circumstances, you need explainability. Yeah, always difficult with an LLM. It's fundamentally a black box. But LLMs can generate software and workflows, especially if you put them in a realistic training scenario. Like this is kind of what we do. We set up sandboxes, like digital twins of the inside of enterprises. We let the agents loose inside the safe zone of the digital twin to get them to build out workflows and take the workflows out and put those into production. Workflows are explainable, right? They're just basically static, like deterministic pieces of code. Yeah, in my home setup, I don't have that. But
Okay.
the general topic of explainability, there is actually a path there, which I think is interesting with all of this.
Okay. Now we have a question from Craig.
Yeah. So how do we see the security and governance evolving as these autonomous agents start operating more independently within enterprises? Well, this is a real softball for me. Like this, literally, our business plan is to be the security and governance layer for these things as they scale in enterprises. And it starts with, like, if you are the single point through which an agent can get access to enterprise data, then they have to go through your system to do the work. If the work's getting done, it's going through your system, which is itself governed and secured. So for us, like the credentials live in the platform, access control is all done in that central point, observability all in the one point. And then workflows get discovered by the AI and put back into the platform, and they can be reviewed because they're like static artifacts, really, list of steps, recipes for getting things done. Those can be reviewed by AI in due course, but you basically, a workflow, you could look at it as a policy or a standard operating procedure or a process or whatever you want to call it. But like at scale, AI running in an enterprise should most of the time, like 90% of the time, not be improvising, but instead just calling back to workflows that have been previously validated. So I actually think, like in a bigger picture sense, in an AI first enterprise that's substantially automated with AI, or like going down this path, that the question of governance is less about regulation and more about governance in the sense of how you're running your business, and that the surface that we as humans are operating over or looking at is the one that tells us about the processes that they're operating. And are those processes correct? Are they failing? Do they need to be adapted? Are they in line with requirements? Are they compliant with the latest regulation that popped up in some jurisdiction that you sell into? Are they portable? You know, can you take your existing processes because you're selling in Spain and enter the Italian market cleanly with them? Right? Those kinds of questions. Those are kind of governance of the organization.
Yeah.
And it's about governing those processes that are being discovered and created, tested, and maintained by the AI.
Do you see a world where it's going to move to, you talked about like just-in-time UI. Do you think we'll have like just-in-time, I don't know, credential management, secret management? Will that be a moving layer, evolving layer?
I think you want that to be more static.
Right.
I would. Right. So you want a credential vault of some type. You want to have direct access over that. I mean, yeah. I mean, this is policy level stuff. I think the policy is, to some extent, you want a human in the loop at least on who has access to what. Maybe you can dynamically provision a credential, dynamically roll over credentials, that kind of thing. But the fact that this system over there, this entity, should have access to this other system, that's a policy question. You want to actually consciously design, or at least explicitly approve.
Yeah.
I saw a tweet recently along the lines, so I'm reading out the question, in case anyone's just, I don't know, listening on their headphones. The question says, I saw a tweet recently along the lines of, I saved $1,000 a month on a SaaS subscription just to spend $300 a month on Claude tokens and 10 hours a week trying to fix my own janky integration. What are your thoughts on this take right now? and how will this ...
change over the next 6 months?
Yeah. So yeah, that's a fun one. I actually don't know how much I'm spending on this right now. I'm just having too much fun to check. So this might apply to me. There's a few different things in the question, like janky integrations. Hopefully that's solved with systems like, frankly, like us. Maybe we have some competitors. But AI will fix the integrations because the humans don't. Yeah, I think I think it kind of goes back to workflows, like this missing layer. But actually, I'll take us out of it, right? Because obviously we do workflows and we think we're great. But even if you don't have something like us, it's expensive at the start, but it's self-improving. So it has a tendency to try to automate itself in code where possible. So like it'll start off with like, oh yeah, I'll remember to do that every morning, and it might write it down in a markdown file internally, which means when it's doing it, it's going to load it up into the context window and spend tokens trying to repeat the steps. But it seems to me to have a tendency, and you can definitely just instruct it to do so if you like, to move that into code at its earliest convenience. So that next time it needs to do that thing, it'll just say, oh, it's 8 a.m. I'll just run the 8 a.m. Python script. Right. So that's kind of like a similar thing to having workflows, like say figuring out how to do it, saving it as a workflow onto a platform like us for later reuse. That makes it fast again, right? That's basically, you're starting off from a cold start where it's 100% burning tokens, but as you kind of prime the pump and like find all the use cases and all the edge cases, and it's kind of beginning to like get all its tooling in place around itself, it gets faster and faster. And if you look at like what's actually happening most of the time, it's actually just deciding to call a piece of code, which isn't spending much tokens at all. So I think that's probably where it goes. You just got to let it warm its cache up in a way for the computer architects in the crowd.
Right. I have one final thought, right? You know, the old adage or the old saying, right? When it's free, you're the product. And, you know, obviously OpenClaw has been purchased by OpenAI. I know Meta, we're trying to get there as well. And I guess given the integrations, right, and the intelligence that it could have and accumulate, like what's your thoughts on that? Are we the product? Is this like, you know, advertising Google search 2.0?
I don't think we're the product on this one, at least not yet. We're definitely the guinea pigs, but not the product. So I don't think OpenAI acquired it, right? So they acquired Peter Steinberger is what it looks like to me, and I'm sure it was a very sweet deal. But they took the open source project and wrapped it in a foundation, and it stays open source. So it's not an owned piece of technology to the best of my understanding. Although I'm sure they have basically a lot of soft control over the direction of it. Yeah. I think if ads appear in anything like this, that's it. That's gone. People are gone. Right? Yeah. There's such a strong sovereignty aspect to this. People want their own. People understand. I think so. I'll put this in like terms. I think that everyone who's used AI at all so far just immediately feels, right? You're using OpenAI in your web browser, right, or on the desktop, and cloud and so on, and it's building up memory about you, and it's in their product, and now you're locked in, right? And now you want to try a different AI that doesn't know all the same stuff about you, right? So people are already feeling this lock-in thing. But as you're getting locked in with your own memories, it's like your data. They're locking you in with your data. It just feels pretty unfair. It also feels extremely personal. And I think that's one of the driving factors here. People are like, I want my own. I want my. If I want to take it to the next level, I actually want to show it like my life. But I'm not going to upload that to Sam Altman, right?
Yeah.
So the sovereignty thing is a really compelling aspect here. I think it's part of the psychology of people buying Mac Minis so they can try and get it all into one physical box. They hold it in their hand and say, my secrets are literally in there and not up there. And so as soon as ads appear and that kind of thing happens, I think that's it.
Game
it's
over.
And people just, there's a fork, there's another version, right? This can easily, like next month, it could be something else. If they don't screw up, it stays OpenClaw. It can rebrand or whatever, but it'll be this project. And they misstep like that, within days there'll be something else, and millions of people will just switch over.
Yeah.
They'll all have their markdown files, right? If you're running this, you literally have a directory or folder on your computer with the memories of the thing, and you just copy it onto the next thing, and it inherits the memories. So it's got that portability. So I don't think we're the product in this. One other little note is very interesting to ask why have we not seen this before from the big companies? And does the existence of this now mean that the big companies will have to step up? And I think I can see why Apple would never have done this. It's just too reckless, right? Just too potentially damaging. The liabilities, the brand damage. When someone's crypto wallet gets stolen or whatever, all their emails get deleted, and the other stuff we've seen on X. With this, I mean, you don't want Siri doing it, right? So they can't do that. They could demonstrate the possibilities in a keynote, but they can't actually ship the product. But you can in open source. But now it exists in open source. Does that mean that they need to put the same stuff into Google Assistant, into Siri, or can they still not go there? I'm not sure of the answer to that. And a part of me, the contrarian in me, wants it to stay open source. It wants it to be one of those things where you realize this could only happen in open source, and it can only succeed in open source. And it's not another big platform thing where a tech giant can just come in and own the whole thing for the rest of the future of humanity. But I might be wrong about that.
hopefully you're right. Hopefully you're right. I think that's our time, Sean. Thank you for joining us on the AI Builders. We have a lot of comments there on the chat. A lot of people enjoyed the presentation. And there will be a recording sent out to everybody after, so people can rewatch it or tune in if they hadn't time to dial in live. So again, thanks very much, Sean. See you soon.
Can I put one closing comment in? If you're using OpenClaw, feel free to use Jentic. It's free. It's free for personal use. Knock yourself out. Tell us what you think. It's going to get better for this use case really, really rapidly now over the next few days. And if you're working in a large enterprise and you're concerned about the stuff, talk to us as well. This is what we do. We keep the stuff secure.
There you go. Thanks, Sean.
All right. Thank you.
Cheers. And that's a wrap, everybody. Thank you for joining. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube and LinkedIn to follow all the previous content. There's a lot of content there about how you build evals, benchmarking, how you're building how Kernel is building agents, how other companies are building agents. And our next event will be on the 19th of March. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And again, a big thank you to Sean Blanchfield for sharing his wisdom and his experience so far with OpenClaw. Bye-bye.